So today we're going to be talking about how to end a relationship with a toxic person. So there are a couple of things that I think we all need to understand when we're talking about a toxic boyfriend or a toxic girlfriend, a toxic friendship, or even a toxic family member. When we want to understand what toxic or toxicity is, it helps us to understand what healthy is. It gives us some contrast to deal with. It gives us some context to deal with. And so if you are in a healthy relationship, you feel safe, you feel nurtured, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel understood. These are all wonderful feelings that make you feel like you're growing, which is the whole point, right? We're here to grow. We're here to expand. And when we are in healthy relationships, then we actually feel ourselves growing. We feel ourselves overcoming challenges. When we're in a relationship with a person who challenges us and this person is a good fit for us, then it feels like it makes sense to come together and to handle this conflict as a unit. And both people feel the expansion and the change. And it's not about one-upmanship. It's not about making the other person feel small. In fact, it's the opposite. When you are in a healthy relationship, you feel as if your partner has your back. You feel as if you have a cheerleader in your corner. That's a really nice feeling. I am someone that didn't feel that way until I met my husband, Anthony. Up until the age of about 45, I didn't figure it out. I hadn't met someone who had the ability to make me believe and trust that they really had my best interests at heart. And I can tell you, as someone who's experienced the contrast, as someone who has been in a long-term relationship and long-term marriage with someone who felt, or at least it seemed that way to me, that he was comfortable as my adversary. It was almost to be expected, right? That this was the norm for him. He didn't expect anything different. And at one point, he actually said to me, "Lisa, what you want doesn't exist. Who do you know that's happy?" And that was pretty much his outlook. And it devastated me because I realized that if he didn't believe in a healthy relationship that felt expansive, it felt connected, it felt loving, it felt nurturing, if he didn't believe it, then he could never achieve it. And as his partner, I could never achieve what I wanted to achieve either if he was my partner. And it was very unsettling for me, but it was a very important moment in my relationship because it helped bring me out of denial, because I was in denial for many years and I was afraid. I was codependent and I was afraid. I was on the codependent hamster's wheel, seeking his approval and also fearing a negative outcome and not quite sure that I could actually make it on my own, not quite sure that I had a right to feel this way. And so there were a lot of doubts going on in my mind, a lot of insecurities, but hearing him say those words really helped me come out of denial. And so when we're talking about a toxic relationship, it does help us to consider what a healthy relationship looks like. And what's really sad is that so many of us are in toxic relationships and they are our norm. Now, why would that be? If you are in a toxic relationship, then, and you don't notice that it's a toxic relationship, perhaps like you just wake up on Tuesday, do what you did on Monday, and so if there's a lot of yelling, a lot of degradation, a lot of screaming, a lot of accusations, a lot of pushing and, nonsense, threatening conversations happening, you might be someone who's just learned to live with your nose above the waterline. You might be someone who is just trying to get by day. This might have become your norm. And if that's the case, you really need to ask yourself how you grew up. Did you grow up in a chaotic, unpredictable home where there were no healthy boundaries, where the adults tried to one-up one another, where the siblings were pitted against one another? Did you grow up in a home where there was toxic gaslighting, toxic triangulation? Were you accused of things that you weren't guilty of? Were you emotionally ignored, emotionally chastised, verbally chastised? Were you made fun of? Were you left out? Were you the scapegoat child? Or even the hero child, the golden child? Where did you fit in the dysfunctional family, the roles that dysfunctional families play? It's important to ask yourself, if I'm in an unhealthy relationship and my root emotion is fear, why is that? How has this become my norm? Why do I continue to walk around on eggshells? Did I grow up walking around on eggshells? I remember as a little girl feeling like the floor in our home was made of glass and it would break at any moment. I was terrified all the time, and the walls felt like they were made of jello, like nothing felt real. And the way I interpreted that as a child was that what I was looking at didn't match what I felt. Everything looked perfect, but everything felt wrong. And that's a very common feeling that people who come from dysfunctional families feel and experience. So some of the earmarks of a toxic person is someone who enjoys hurting you, someone who enjoys when you're down, actually delights when you're having trouble with your boyfriend, or you're having trouble in your marriage, or you're having trouble at work. This is someone who thrives on you not doing well. This is someone who might also need to one-up you all the time. And so there's jealousy, there's envy. Someone who is toxic has a lot of rage that they haven't learned to manage. Someone who is toxic will say things like, well, I love you, that's why I need to know where you are all the time. Right? And if you feel uncomfortable with that and you kind of hold on to where you're at because it feels uncomfortable, it feels jealous, it feels controlling, then they spin it on you and they accuse you of not being able to accept their love, right? So now it's your fault that you don't want to be suffocated by this person. And their response will be to guilt you and to blame you and to spin it on you and make you feel like there's something wrong with you because you need space, or you're just feeling like this person is trying to control you. So a toxic relationship is a one-way relationship. Although they'll say that they are in a fair relationship with you, what ends up happening is there's one reality, and it's usually the toxic person's reality that everyone involved, if you're talking about a really authoritative person who is toxic, they could actually convince an entire family that they're right and everyone else is wrong, and we need to go along with this leader or this ruler's idea or ideology and mindset. So a toxic person is someone who enjoys putting you down. A toxic person is someone who is resistant to change or who doesn't change. A toxic person is someone who resents you because you want to change. A toxic person is someone who absolutely does not seek resolution. Your relationship with a toxic person will feel very stifled, like it's not going anywhere. You'll feel like you are in emotional quagmire. And you'll feel like the other person is okay with where you're at. And you'll feel, if you're in a relationship with a toxic person, you'll feel like this is wrong and I want to change it, but unfortunately when you're dealing with a toxic person, things just don't change. If you're like most people think that, oh, if I just tolerate this, things will get better. Or if I just do some of what she wants me to do, then she'll calm down. Or all I have to do is tweak my own personality a little bit and maybe not go out with my friends on Tuesday and, maybe not invite my family over and things will be okay. So if you're like most people, like you see that your partner's upset or your friend's upset, and you do something within yourself that you believe might change the relationship or make it better. But what ends up happening is you don't realize it at the time, but you're actually enabling the toxic behavior, and this makes the toxic person actually worse. A toxic person wants to hook you in and get you to feel like you shouldn't leave, right? A toxic person wants control over you. So the last thing that they want is for you to actually abandon them and say, I'm done. And so it's not uncommon for a toxic person to actually look for someone who is highly empathetic, to look for someone who is highly nurturing, and look for someone who can seek resolution, because you're someone who is not going to abandon a toxic relationship all that easily. It's important to think about this idea that toxic people are looking for people who are submissive, who are highly agreeable, who avoid confrontation. And so the reason I want to add that is because we have to know who we are. We have to know if we are highly agreeable. We have to know if we're the type of person that subjugates our needs for the sake of others. So someone says, where do you want to go out to dinner? And you're the person that says, I don't know, where do you want to go out to dinner? Or what do you want to do for the holidays this year? I don't know. What do you want to do for the holidays this year? Oh, I would like to go climb Mount Everest. Okay, we'll go climb Mount Everest. And you have no intention and no desire to climb Mount Everest, but you are so highly agreeable and so submissive, and you naturally subjugate your needs for the sake of others. You may find that you are actually giving up your rights to have an opinion when it comes to relationships. And when you are in a relationship with a toxic person, they want you. They want you because you're highly agreeable. They want you because you're going to be submissive to them, and you'll stay locked in the dynamic, which will give them control over you. And what will end up happening is, over time, if you don't push back, you lose a little bit more of yourself each and every day. So toxic people generally don't feel sorry for treating other people poorly. They feel entitled to treat other people poorly. Toxic people don't really feel remorse. They don't feel guilty. So if you know someone who is cruel to other people and you notice that there isn't much reflection on that, or they very easily make excuses for their poor behavior, that's a sign that you're dealing with a toxic person. Now, how do we leave these relationships? Because the thing is, when you're trying to leave a toxic relationship, it doesn't go easily. The person who is toxic is triggered by you wanting to set a boundary, by you opening your mouth, by you saying, no bueno, I'm not putting up with this stuff anymore, and I have a right to do what I want to do and go where I want to go. And sure, we're in a committed relationship, but there are boundaries here. You know, you don't need to be a helicopter partner. You don't need to know where I am at all moments of the day. You don't need to yell at me this way. You don't need to criticize me this way. Or maybe you do for your own reasons, but I don't need to tolerate it. It can be very difficult to leave a toxic person because they tend to get worse. They tend to explode. They can be rageful. They can be highly, highly reactive. And so what happens a lot of the times below the veil of consciousness is, throughout the course of the relationship, you may have been conditioned to fear leaving a toxic person. They might have conditioned you to feel sorry for them. They might have given you the sob story 1 million times over about their childhood or about abuse that they suffered, and it may or may not be true. Toxic people also tend to lie. They tend to exaggerate, and it's all in an attempt to manipulate your heartstrings. If they need money, they'll lie about where they are financially. If they want just your support or your energy and your attention, they might exaggerate a conversation that they had with someone. But the goal is to make sure that your focus is them. That's really what they need. Now, the problem with that is, like a classic codependent narcissistic relationship that I tend to usually talk about, is that it's two people in one relationship worried about one person. And so when the toxic person is high, you're supposed to be high. And when they're low, you're supposed to be low. And if they're low, they'll blame you for being low, or they'll blame someone else for being low. And they might be angry because they're low. And if they react to being low, they have poor behavior, then they excuse the poor behavior. Another sign that you're involved with a toxic person is this idea that you are conditioned to feel responsible for things that you're not sorry for. And so you might be dating someone who pushes you to the point where you're apologizing even though you didn't do anything wrong. Or you're apologizing for the whole thing. They say, you have to apologize. I'm not going to shut up until you apologize. You made me angry. Now you should apologize, right? I got upset. Now you should apologize. There's no thinking about this idea that this thing happened in the 3D and I got triggered and I reacted, and that's something that I have to learn to regulate, right? There's none of that. There's all, this thing happened, you said this thing, I had a trigger to it, I behaved poorly, and it's all your fault. Now, it's possible you might trigger your partner, but you're not responsible for their behavior. And this is where self-accountability has to come into play. And if you're someone who's willing to be self-accountable and self-reflective, it is such a gift. It's a gift of empowerment, because as you begin to say, wait a minute, I felt this way, but I stayed in my body, I stayed in my skin, I accepted how I felt, I decided what I could do about what I could control, and I let go of what I could not control, and I made a decision that was in alignment with grace and dignity and self-respect. If you can learn how to do that, then you're going to be able to recognize when someone else is not doing that. You're going to be able to recognize when someone is being highly immature or highly reactive or highly toxic. You're going to be able to see it. Now, it gets tremendously clear the more self-responsible you are when it comes to toxic people. When you are regulating your own emotions, when you are saying, I got angry, but I'm not going to take it out on you. I need some time to go and think about our conversation. Then you earn the right to expect that from other people, right? So we want to be careful that we're not playing this blame game, because that always ends badly. And all we're doing is quantifying this negative energy, whether it's the neighbor across the street or the person on the highway that's driving too fast or too slow, whether it's someone in the parking lot at Costco, whether it's your in-laws, whether it's your spouse. When there's arguing and yelling going on, nothing gets resolved. That's not healthy communication. And all we're doing is making the fire bigger and stronger and hotter. So how do we end a toxic relationship with someone who we think might have high narcissistic traits, for instance? Somebody who lacks empathy for other people, somebody who exploits other people emotionally, intimidates them, threatens them, maybe with their body language, somebody who stonewalls, makes it impossible for you to get from point A to point B, somebody who is passive aggressive and who belittles you, someone who that you feel has contempt for you. How do we end relationships with these people, and how do we move forward? I think that the most important step is to be honest with yourself about what you're dealing with. That might be the hardest thing in the world to do, is to recognize that you have a toxic relationship with a sibling, or you have a toxic relationship with your neighbor, or you have a toxic relationship with someone that you really love. It's possible to have toxic relationships with people who don't have your best interests at heart. It's hard to believe that, but you can have a 20-year friendship with someone who really enjoys putting you down, or who enjoys minimizing you or marginalizing you in front of you or behind your back, right? It's really absurd to wake up and realize that that could be a factor. But how do we end relationships with people who are toxic and who are preventing growth in the relationship? How do we do that? So number one, you have to accept what you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a toxic person and you're feeling stuck, right? And you're recognizing that there is no personal growth in this relationship. You're recognizing there's a lot of constriction in this relationship. You're recognizing the earmarks of a toxic person, the lack of empathy, the exploitation, the sense of entitlement, the lack of forgiveness, the criticisms, right? All of that, the blaming, the lack of accountability, the lack of respect for you and dignity, other people's dignity, right? You're recognizing this, right? You may even have recognized lying, pathological lying, and you're at a point where you just can't take it anymore. So acknowledging what's going on is number one. The next thing that you want to do is you want to at least try. I don't believe boundaries work with someone like a narcissist. It's just my experience personally and professionally, that when you're dealing with someone who has high narcissistic traits, The only thing that works is no contact, the gray rock, or what I call shutty shutty. So I speak to them as little as possible. I withdraw my energy completely, and I do not respond. I know that they're looking for a reaction, and even though my ego might be jumping out of my chest wanting to react, I won't. I will shut my mouth. I might scream in my car. I might go punch a pillow when I get home, but I am not feeding the monster that narcissism is, because a narcissist actually needs your energy and needs your reactivity to grow and to fester and to feel big and to feel grandiose. And so that's what a narcissist wants. A narcissist has to have the last word. A narcissist has to come out on top. A narcissist has to feel that they have won over you. And unfortunately, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, they will cross that line. And I think that's a very important lesson for people to recognize. We hear it all the time. You read a newspaper, pick up any newspaper across the world, listen to any news story, and you'll hear narcissism, sociopathy, and psychopathy. You'll hear it in the news stories. You'll hear about stories where the person that perpetrated a crime or someone who victimized someone else, they went over this line that most people will not go over. They have said and or done or behaved in a way that healthy people just don't. And so I'm a huge advocate of learning how to shutty shutty. I'm a huge advocate of, I say, shut the phone, like just shut the phone. Do not text back, like go the other direction. One of the problems that a lot of people have when they're trying to end a toxic relationship is they feel like, well, if I don't go back at this person, the other person wins. I'm here to tell you that's pure ego. And that ain't going to win, because a narcissist's ego is galvanized. And I don't know anyone who isn't a narcissist that tried to go up against a narcissist that won in that realm. You just can't. So the best thing for you to do is to pull your energy back. Just drain the narcissist's battery. So you want to make sure that you're not engaging with the person that you're trying to leave. You're not keeping this fire alive by allowing your ego to feel like you have to go back at this person. That's very important. You want to make sure that you're setting some type of a boundary. At least you're trying. It may or may not work depending on the level of toxicity or the spectrum that this person is on. If they're highly, highly toxic, boundaries aren't going to work. You may have to just absolutely go no contact, but at least try. So if you have let's say a coworker who goes into your desk and takes things out of your desk without asking, you have a coworker who lies about you behind your back, you have a coworker that makes it difficult for you to finish projects, you might want to say to them gently, I saw you going into my desk, and I'd really appreciate that before you go into my desk, you ask me. If I have extra supplies, I don't mind sharing. All right, so you're setting the boundary. At that point, you really have to make sure that you toe the line with the boundary. Now, that might look, for someone else, that might look saying something, right, to your superior that, Catherine keeps going into my desk. I asked her not. I'm feeling violated. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I would like a different office, or I would like to be moved to a different section of the office, whatever. Or it might be you making sure that there's nothing in your desk so that Catherine can't take anything. So it really does depend on the situation. If the person doesn't listen to your boundary, you take it to the next level. And that's going to be decided based on the situation that you're in. I've known people that have actually moved out of their house. They were having such a problem with their narcissistic neighbor that even after calling the police, it didn't get better. It was only going to get worse, and the family upped and moved. I get that, right? And I know I can hear people saying, like, in their head, like, I shouldn't have to move. I understand that. But there are just some people, like I said earlier, they don't have that line. And if you're dealing with someone who doesn't have that line and you become their target, it is the last thing that you want to experience, because they do not stop. And so when we set a boundary, we have to be firm in the boundary. We have to know that there's a 50% chance that the boundary will be violated. And in my opinion, we have to be willing to choose a path that offers us the least resistance. So I don't want to go up against someone who doesn't have that line. That's the last thing I want to do. So I'm going to make decisions that are in alignment with peace, that are in alignment with abundance, that are in alignment with contentment. And so that's really my goal each and every day. So make sure that when you're setting boundaries, you're recognizing that this person may say no to the boundary. And at that point, you may have to do something you don't want to do, but something that might net you peace if that's really your goal. It's so important that you understand what's coming down the pike. When you're trying to end a toxic relationship with someone, they often get worse. So I think understanding what might happen is also very key. It can help to mentally prepare you. In other words, I was naive when I went through my divorce. I thought if I'm fair and I split the dinner plates, if I split the photo albums, if I split the forks and knives, certainly my partner, even though we're dissolving our relationship, our marital agreement, will be the same. No, that doesn't happen. Just because you come into a relationship fairly doesn't mean the other person will. If you're dealing with someone who is toxic and they need to one-up you, you wanting to leave them is going to trigger them. So no, it's not going to be easy. And just like why we take umbrellas with us when we know it's going to rain, you want to protect yourself. So how do you want to protect yourself? You want to know that it's coming. The next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a really good support system. You have people that you can go to and you can talk to about what it is you are dealing with. Feeling supported is key, because lots of times in toxic relationships, the toxic person has been conditioning you to believe that everything's your fault. Right? They're conditioning you to take on the blame. They're conditioning you to feel like you're the crazy one. And so they've messed with your sense of reality. Sometimes you come out of a toxic relationship and you don't know which way is up. It's that bad, right? Your self-doubt is through the roof. And so it's really important. I'm not kidding. Find yourself a support person. Find yourself a support group. Get yourself into some type of an online group support system. Get yourself into some trauma therapy. Work with a certified trauma therapist who understands what it's like to come out of a toxic relationships. Many of us are struggling with complex PTSD once we leave a toxic relationship and we don't even realize it. And so if you're trying to come out of or end a toxic relationship, it's really important that you seek support. It's important that you realize that your mental health, your emotional well-being absolutely relies on you ending a toxic relationship. It absolutely does. When we're in relationships with people who are toxic, they become a part of our lives. And we share almost everything with them, and they can taint everything. You could get a job promotion and then they just crap all over it, right? You can be sick and then they're sicker, or you're sick and they show you that they're indifferent to you being ill, or they accuse you of not being ill and just looking for attention. There are so many ways that a toxic relationship can hurt you. Spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, psychologically, financially. So it's really important that you take this seriously and you recognize that ending a toxic relationship is for your mental and emotional and spiritual and physical and psychological well-being. Another huge one is to remember that you're going to be grieving. You're going to be grieving the fantasy. But there's no way that you can have a relationship with someone who is so toxic that they have narcissism, or they are a sociopath, or they are a psychopath. You can't have relationships with people who enjoy hurting other people. You just can't, right? It's just impossible. It's no bueno. And so once you identify that this is going on in your life, that this is what you're dealing with, it's really important that you follow these steps. And you also recognize that even though the relationship was toxic, there was a part of you that was really invested. There was a part of you that wanted it to work out. And that's totally okay. That's a beautiful thing. That you had so much empathy, you had so much forgiveness, you had so much kindness, you had so much hope that this person might change, or you had hope that if you said the right thing, he would change or she would change. You were thinking about the future. You were thinking about, well, if I do this, then maybe everything will work out. You were thinking that, well, I invested 2 years and I don't want to just throw that away. So it's important that you give yourself time and space to grieve this relationship. Like I said, even if it was unhealthy. Just because it was unhealthy doesn't mean that you weren't emotionally invested. It doesn't mean that you didn't have hopes, you didn't have dreams. It doesn't mean that you were imagining that one day that this person would be happy and one day you'd finally have that dream relationship. So it's important that you recognize that grieving and letting go of the fantasy is going to be part of this process. Make sure at all times you have someone in your life that recognizes and knows where you are and what you're going through. Make sure that you have a contact person. Make sure that you have money, cash on hand in case you have to leave a difficult situation. Make sure that your passwords are changed. Make sure that you have some clothes. Make sure you have an exit strategy. Make sure that people that you love and you care about and who you can trust know what's going on at all times. Know that it's not going to be easy, but know that it's going to be worth it. Know that living in the dark is never, ever good. Know that there are some people that are more afraid of the light than they are the dark. Know that once you get out of the grips of a toxic relationship, in time, you have to believe this, in time things will absolutely get better. I am someone who beat the darkness, and I am here to tell you that it is worth the fight. It is worth every tear. It is worth every conversation that you have to get this right. It is worth every relationship that you have that is just as dysfunctional as the last. It's worth learning what you're doing wrong, because one day if you stay on this path, you're going to absolutely get it right. When you struggle with codependency, most oftentimes you don't know it. People don't normally think about codependency as a program. They don't normally recognize how codependency is a subconscious program, that your mind is literally built before the age of 7 to behave a certain way and to react to certain situations and certain triggers a certain way. We don't usually consider how being codependent is tied to our childhoods. What did you observe in childhood? What kind of mom did you have? Did you have a mom who was a people pleaser? Did you have a dad who was highly narcissistic, or vice versa? Did you grow up with parents who were not emotionally regulated? Did you grow up feeling invisible? Did you grow up feeling not good enough? Did you grow up in this paradigm that made you feel like you were subordinate, right, to other people, that you didn't have a right to a self? Now, when you grow up in this type of a situation, you're not anchored to the self. You don't become self-actualized. You don't become self-individualized. How could you? In order to become self-actualized and self-individualized, you would have needed a healthy parent, right? A healthy authority figure outside of you that was able to make you feel like whatever was going on inside of you was enough. Now, when you grow up in a home where you feel invisible, you have to understand that you're part of a certain system. You're part of a particular paradigm. And this paradigm can be completely corrupt. Everybody can be running amok. Mom could be reacting to dad. Dad could be reacting to mom. Your sister could, be highly emotional. Everybody's trying to manage and control your sister. Your brother might be drinking. Your sister might be a heroin addict. There can be so many things going on in your family, and no one's paying attention to how people feel on an authentic level, how you feel on an authentic level. Everybody's like a bunch of atoms or molecules that have been heated up and they're bouncing off of each other. No one's calm. No one's serene. There's no stillness. In order to develop a self, you need stillness. You need peace. You need time for your mind to understand and connect with your emotional body. Who am I? What am I? What is this I? Right? When everybody, mom and dad, your sister, your brother, aunts, uncles, or everyone's reacting to someone else's behavior, where is the I? There's just reactivity. And so you don't realize that when you come from a home like that, you're really taught to not have an I. So codependency is really a loss of selfhood. You have no I. I mean, you do, but it hasn't been fully developed. You haven't hit certain milestones in your life, right? So codependency is really a journey of becoming your own I. And how you become your own I is you have to break through the program. You have to, break through the family system. You have to break through the hologram that is running your life, that so many of us are running and we don't even recognize that we're running it. It was a huge aha moment in my life when I was told by my therapist that, you are in fact codependent, and the way you were raised in childhood is the reason you are codependent. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant, right? And so what I did was I set myself out on a journey to read everything I could about codependency. But what I found that I was missing was, well, how do I fix it? How do I fix it? And then I realized that the only way to fix it was to really get inside my subconscious mind and recognize the patterns that were running around in my head, the behaviors that were habitual, my triggers, the way that I responded to people, my emotional set point. I talk about the emotional set point in Quantum Tools to Help You Heal Your Life Now. It's a book I wrote about the law of attraction and how we are all living out a paradigm. And until you awaken to the paradigm, like the movie The Matrix, you will stay subordinate. You will expect someone else to come around and to save you. I think what happens to a lot of us as children, if we have this mother wound, if we suffer this, and most of us do, come on. Growing up is difficult. Being abandoned and being expected to go have all the answers to all of your problems is, it's a difficult thing to accept full responsibility for yourself and not make someone else your savior, which is what codependents do. I'm waiting. If I do this for this person, then this person will love me, right? If I do this, then I am enough. It's sort of like, someone else is my God, and the Bible says, don't put false gods before me. You can't have a false God before you. You can't. You have to really merge with yourself and merge with your own personal God, the God that created you. And you have to do what you can to make sure that you're running your life based on what feels authentic for you. And ultimately, what feels authentic for everybody, in my humble opinion, is love. So if we can return to love of ourself, then we will become natural repellents for narcissists, because a narcissist needs a people pleaser. A narcissist needs somebody who has high empathy. A narcissist needs somebody who is going to forego their own experience for the sake of pleasing this other person, so that this other person will love them and take care of them and make them feel enough. So healing from codependency, if you're struggling with codependency, and this is your mindset, this is your default setting, like I talk about in The Road Back to Me. If this is your default, if this is what you've been programmed to do, you're not going to be able to have healthy, authentic relationships. It's an impossibility, because to have an authentic relationship with another, you have to have an authentic relationship with the self. Now, to have a healthy relationship, which I am so grateful that I was able to go from a codependent mindset to an interdependent mindset. So when I was codependent, I really did lean on my ex-husband, and he did lean on me. And so it was like, if he fell, I fell, right? Or if I fell, he fell. So we were leaning on one another. It was not healthy. It was enmeshed. In The Road Back to Me, I talk about how there was this moment of accountability when I was reading Melody Beattie's book, Codependent No More, where I recognized I am in this triangle experience where, I am not taking care of myself. I am taking care of his needs, and I'm expecting him to take care of my needs. So I was not taking care of myself in that experience. And then when he did not read my mind, or he didn't do what I expected him to do, I felt wounded. And I felt like I had a right to feel wounded, which, peeling back and recognizing that cycle, it was a dysfunctional cycle. And when I saw it, when I was like, oh, that's what this thing is, that's why I'm so unhappy, that's why, I'm never going to be happy, because I essentially married someone who told me to my face, I never think about your feelings. So I was abandoning me, and I married somebody who was emotionally avoidant, who lacked empathy, and who felt entitled to call me names, especially when I wanted to address a particular situation that we were having in our family. So, I was burning the candle at both ends, and that's what codependents do. They abandon themselves, and then they manifest partners that are incapable of seeing them. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to you stopping the cycle, which is scary, because part of healing from codependency is like what Melody Beatty writes about, there's no rescue boat coming. Like, it's all on you, sweetheart. Like, you can stomp your feet and you can be angry, but until there's some aha moment, and the second part of my coaching program is accountability. We talk about how a codependent person who, yes, has been wounded and has been sucked into this matrix that was in play long before you ever got to planet Earth, dear one. And now you're in this family system that's dysfunctional. So now you're in a family system, you're in a dysfunctional societal system, and so many of your friends are in the same system, and everyone thinks they're doing everything right, but no one's happy. So now unhappiness becomes the norm. So who's looking within, right? You usually have to suffer so much pain, and you go through so many narcissistically abusive relationships to the point where you realize, I have nowhere else to go but up. Like, I am the common denominator. And that's really difficult, because to have a healthy relationship with another person, you must have some sense of accountability. Like, what have I done? Like, where do I fit in all of this, right? Without this aha moment, this moment of accountability, of clarity, like, have I been giving my power over to someone? Like, some people will struggle because they'll say, Lisa, you're blaming the victim. I'm trying to liberate somebody who has been a victim of narcissistic abuse. I am trying to help someone, and some people will hear it and some people won't, but I'm trying to help that person who grew up in a dysfunctional family system. Your family was dysfunctional. Your family was dysfunctional. You may have been affected by alcoholism. You may have been affected by narcissism. Unconsciousness, living a subconscious life. Your grandparents could have been the most abusive people in the world, and now your parents are living out that paradigm, right? Bouncing off of each other, trying to get their needs met with one another, angry, irritable, resentful, hypersensitive to criticism, right? Then they have children who have needs, and they resent the children who have needs. You're the third generation of this nonsense, and you're stuck. And what do? You've never learned to honor yourself. Why? Because mom and dad didn't honor themselves. They were never honored. And they never taught you, you are enough. You were born enough. And you have the right to break through this matrix, break through this subconscious pattern, and live an authentic life. You have that right. To do that is difficult, right? When I was, at my dining room table and I got to that section of Melody Beatty's book, I slammed it shut. It was like, this moment where it was like, you're part of this. It's not your fault that you're part of it. You've been sucked into this paradigm, but only you can get yourself out. And that's why I think a big piece of codependent recovery that's missing, at least when I was in therapy, I went to 4 or 5 therapists before I found the one psychotherapist that said, you're codependent. But even then it was like, okay, what do I do to fix it, right? And it was through my own work, through learning about psychology, learning about hypnosis, learning about quantum mechanics. It's not me, it's my programming. I have to fix my programming. And if I can fix my programming, I can naturally align with me. The question is, how do I reverse engineer and get back to my true self, which is what the 12-week online class, the breakthrough class that I offer is all about, is returning people back to the self. How do I get there? But this, you cannot, and I hope people hear this, because in order to have an authentic relationship with another person, you can't escape accountability. You have to be responsible for your own feelings. So, and it gets messy, because if I have to accept my own feelings, I have to give up on this fantasy that Prince Charming is going to ride in on the white horse and save me. I think this comes from, yes, growing up, so many of us, growing up watching things like Walt Disney, and, little boys want to be the prince that rescues the girl that has all these problems, and little girls want to be rescued by the prince that's strong and has his white horse. And I think that fantasy is really reinforced if you have been abandoned by mommy, if you have been abandoned by daddy. And so if there is this abandonment, right, this moment of why have you forsaken me? It kind of, and that doesn't get healed, that doesn't get resolved. So you're always seeking this savior, which is mom, right? Mom was supposed to save you, or dad was supposed to save you. This external person was supposed to save you. You entered this world connected to your mother on an umbilical cord, and then they cut it. There you go, kid. Welcome to planet Earth and all its dysfunctional crap, That's what happens. Like, really? Oh my God. Everybody's asleep, Everybody's asleep. Everyone's trying to read everybody else's mind, and everybody wants someone else to make them feel better. And lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And I'm not allowed to feel my feelings. I might get judged for feeling my feelings. I might experience more abandonment. I don't want to do that. What's the answer? Don't feel. Don't feel. Don't feel. Don't feel your feelings. Pretend. Fawn. People please. Become a chameleon. Become what you think people want you to be. Never, ever, ever say no, So it's this fear of additional abandonment, right? So what is metaphorically, what do little girls and little boys do? They fantasize about being the rescuer of somebody who has all these problems. That's so nice. Or they fantasize about being rescued. And then guess what? Nothing works, dear ones. You are on planet Earth. You go through your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. I coach people who are in their 70s. I one time coached somebody who was in their 80s. You go through life. No one ever tells you, or it doesn't hit, it doesn't land that, oh, there's this thing called codependency, and you might be subconscious. You might be living out a subconscious pattern. And you may be, attracting people in your life that mirror the experiences that you had in childhood. The exact childhood experiences you loathed, that have made this energetic imprint on your being are exactly what you manifest, right? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And that's why with my online coaching class and my books, the Codependency Manifesto was just released. I talk about you have to awaken. This is a real thing. This is a subconscious pattern. And if you want to have an authentic relationship with someone else, you are deserving of that, but you cannot do it if you're still part of the old matrix, the old paradigm, which is your dysfunctional family and your dysfunctional family's family, and so on and so on. Life is a hologram, dear ones, and karma is real. Karma is not about punishing you. It's the law of cause and effect, right? There is a wheel and it's churning, and the only way to have an authentic relationship with anyone else is to begin waking up. And part of the awakening process is accountability, right? And then you can experience ascension. That's essentially my online class, is the awakening phase, accountability, and ascension. And this is the way that we free ourselves from this codependent matrix. Now, accountability is a big issue for some people, because that means I have to look at myself. That means I have to give up all of these fawning behaviors. I have to give up people pleasing. Who am I without this people pleasing? What happens when I say no? People are going to get pissy and they're going to walk away. Then what? Then you're experiencing the exact thing you never wanted to experience, which is being abandoned. And so you're triggered again, right? So healing from codependency is really getting into that nitty-gritty space and recognizing that is a natural occurrence. Your brain is wired to fear this abandonment. But if you stick with it, if you learn how to process your emotions, if you learn how to stay in your body, in my class I talk about Amy the amygdala and Harry the hippocampus. You've got to learn to observe these experiences in your brain that are natural, that are going to trigger a limbic response. That's where the nitty-gritty is. Some people talk about doing yoga. Some people talk about mindfulness. It's all helpful. Anything that allows you to stay in your body while you're experiencing the CPTSD response to rejection. And that's why people please, right? That's why people fawn. We have to recognize that is manipulative. It is controlling. So if I do what you want me to do and I don't want to do it, so I dishonor myself, right? And if you haven't read the works of Nathaniel Branden, I do suggest you do it. Honor the self, or honoring the self, right? It's an amazing, amazing book. So if I cater to you and I do something that you want me to do, even though I don't want to do it, what am I doing? You become my God. Now, why am I making you my God? I'm making you my God because I don't want you to reject me. I want to be in your good graces. Keep going. Why is that? Because I'm afraid you'll abandon me. Because if I'm afraid I will be alone. And if I'm alone, what does that mean? Lions and tigers and bears, it means everything's my responsibility. So if I sink, I sink. If I swim, I swim. Now, it is going to be harder for some people versus other people to heal from codependency. That is just a fact. And that is not, saying that, saying that, some people have a right to, stay stuck versus other people. It's not about a right. It's just a fact. In my coaching class, we have run through various types of abuse and trauma. And it is a lot when people start opening up and they start explaining why they are codependent, why they are afraid to confront people, why they're afraid to say no. Oh my word, it is horrendous what has happened in people's lives. And so I think it's really, really important that we do recognize that it's going to be harder for some people to wake up and okay, what do I need to do here? Are you kidding me? You're a mom, you have 4 children, you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship. You are financially dependent on this person who has isolated you from friends and family. You have, and this has happened, this brainwashing has happened over time. Your mind is no longer your own. Your life is run by fear, right? You may have experienced horrific abuse. Your children may begin now have emotional problems or behavioral issues. And, the matrix is thick, lots of muck and mire and lots of patterns, right? Escaping that is not going to be easy. So I think it's important, when we're talking about codependent recovery, that if you're somebody who is in a dire experience, recognize that, number one, it's not your fault you're in that experience. It's not your fault that you were born into this matrix that is mostly subconscious. It's not your fault that you're born into a family that is subconscious. It's not your fault that below the age of 7, you're in a hypnotic brainwave state and you're being taught this stuff. It's not your fault that, you went out into the world at 12, 13, 14 looking to be rescued. That's not your fault. That's what everybody does. Everybody wants to be rescued by someone else until you recognize that it doesn't work. That when you are someone who wants to be rescued, and the illusion is that if I rescue you, then I'm good enough. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think it's if I rescue you, somehow in that I'm rescued by the rescuing of you, which means I'm still not rescuing myself on a very deep level. And so this journey towards having an authentic relationship with someone else is going to be more difficult for some people than others. That is just a fact, right? That means, what does that mean? That means it might take you longer to heal from codependency, to change your subconscious programming. You're talking about neural wiring, right? I did an interview with Bruce Lipton years ago, and he confirmed what I'm saying. I did an interview with Dr. Bruce Perry, who said that the first year of life is so critical because that's when the brain is wiring itself for socialization, for the ability to trust people. And so, it's not your fault if you are suffering with codependency and you continue to attract people who take advantage of your emotions. But until you awaken and you realize where the power is within you to begin at least slowly shifting it. And step 1 is awakening. Like step 1, just awaken. Awaken like this is my issue. This is what I'm doing. If you're someone who gets stuck in anger because you do for other people and they're not doing in return for you, you have to see that, because as long as you're angry, you're attached. And as long as you're angry, you're in resistance. And as long as you're in resistance, you're actually reinforcing this reality with the matrix. So guess what's going to happen? More people show up that make you angry. So anger is a valid emotion, but we have to learn to process it and move it out of your body. Resentment, normal emotion. If you are doing something that you've always done and you think people should respond to you a certain way, it's the meaning that you give to that doing. It's the meaning that you give to fawning. It's the meaning that you give to enabling, right? Well, I did that for her. I paid her rent. She should want to cat sit for me. I paid her rent. Or, I rescued her a couple of years ago from, this catastrophic relationship that she had. Like, she should answer the phone if I call her at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. or whatever. It's this expectation that a lot of us carry as codependents who don't realize that we're saying, please take care of me. I took care of you. Please take care of me in return. So there's this need for us to become self-actualized, which is a very grown-up thing to do, which is very scary. And I don't think it's our fault. I really don't. Because we're taught that we need other people just to get through life, right? We're taught to rely. We're taught to need. We're taught to put our faith into other people and other things. And God forbid we go against the grain and we actually are individuals with our own thought process. God forbid we have an individual thought, you're persecuted, right? So if you don't go along with this faith, then someone else comes along and says you're no good, right? Or if you don't go along with, that fashion, trend, then people, look down at you. We're all conditioned to have these types of experiences. And the only thing that's going to help us is if we awaken. And so if you're having this moment like I did at my dining room table, where it's just like, wow, I do this thing. I do this thing. I didn't realize I did this thing. And I'm recognizing it was a subconscious pattern. But my power lies in being able to break through this thing, break through this programming, to really take the blinders off and see how my childhood affected me. Am I struggling with CPTSD? Is this fawning and people pleasing and enabling and rescuing and catering and fixing? Is it so I don't experience more pain, right? Am I in my adult life continuing this experience that I had with my mother, with my father, with my sister, with my coaches, with my teachers, this please don't hurt me experience? Please, you have the final say over whether or not I am worthy. No, dear one, you're enough. You are worthy just as you are. But you can't awaken from that until you see that you might be doing that. So in order to have an authentic relationship with someone else, you have to have an authentic relationship with yourself. And having an authentic relationship with yourself means becoming accountable for yourself. So it's slowly learning how to love yourself, right? You're not waiting for someone else to love you anymore. It's slowly replacing negative talk with positive talk. You're not waiting for the postman to say, wow, Lisa, you got your hair done. You look great. No, you are affirming yourself. You're not waiting for your best friend to say, oh, you just got that promotion at work. That's awesome, right? You're not begging someone see me anymore. No, you're not 2 anymore. You're not 3 anymore. You have a right to affirm yourself. So it really is a dissolution of these psychic cords, right, to dysfunctional patterns. It really is coming face to face with these dysfunctional attachments to the matrix that is running your life, and you don't even realize that you're running it. It is everything. Why do you wear the clothes that you wear? Is it because you think someone in the matrix is going to think you're more important? Or are you trying to tell people, look, I have this bag or I wear these shoes, and it's because I want you, which is you trying to control someone else's perception of you, which is you really not taking responsibility. Listen, you want to go buy an expensive bag because you can. That's awesome, and it's great quality, and it's amazing. But don't make buying that bag about someone else, because that's you attaching to the matrix. That's you acting in a codependent way, right? If you want to, get a new job because, you just want to get a new job and it's going to bring in more money, and you want your children to take piano lessons, that's awesome. But you don't do that because doing that says you believe that, it says in your culture that means that you're doing good, or that you're good, or you're better than. Again, it's codependency. That's, making other people your God. Your worth is coming from other people. So it's important that you recognize that. Am I, people pleasing? Am I fawning? Am I wearing this red dress to dinner because I want this person to say, wow, that's a beautiful red dress? Or am I wearing this red dress because it pleases me? We have to return back to the I. We have to return back to accountability. And, when we do that, when we take responsibility for ourselves and we end up at a place where we're loving ourselves, that's when we can be more authentically loving with other people. That's when the need to judge people and the need to fear people begins to dissolve. And it doesn't happen over time. It does not happen over time. What happens over time is that as you begin to trust yourself, as you begin to affirm yourself, as you begin to ask yourself, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? How do I feel about what this person said? Rather than going into a fawning response or a people-pleasing response or an agreeable, disposition when someone says something to me that makes me think that I've done something wrong, right? And guilt has been triggered in me. Rather than go into a making sure that this person still loves me response. Rather than that, maybe ask myself how I feel about what this person said and how I feel about feeling this guilt. Can I just sit with this fear? Can I just sit with the guilt? Can I not react to the guilt? The other day, my husband wanted to have steak for breakfast. He has some irritable bowel issues. It's really not that important. The issue is that I put the steak when he went shopping in the freezer, and he woke up and he wanted to have the steak for breakfast, right? He's on a protein diet. And I said, oh, I put the steak in the freezer. And the look in his eyes was, oh, now I have to defrost it. It crushed me, and it shouldn't, right? The program is still active inside of me. The thing that's different with me now is that I'm aware of it. So what happens is when I love him and I appreciate him and I see him as an autonomous being with his own sets of needs and values, right? However, what happens is when I love someone and I sense that there's anything that I've done, if I've had the slightest part in it and this person is disappointed, then I still feel the guilt in me is still triggered. Why? Because as a little girl, I was guilted for everything. I was made to feel like I was insignificant. With my mom, I was treated with indifference. I felt my father loved me to a certain point, but my father didn't protect me and shield me from what was happening within my mother. But at least I felt like, oh, at least daddy loves me, right? But still, as I'm 55, and I work on this stuff every single day because I know it is everywhere. This pattern is everywhere. This subconscious reality is everywhere. You talk to people and you'll start to realize, they're asleep. That's not judging, that's discerning. I made my husband a wonderful dinner, and he came home late and, he didn't even acknowledge that, I trimmed the rose bush in the front of the house, and he didn't acknowledge that, I threw away the flowers that were in the bedroom because they started to get musty. So there's this, I'm doing all these things in the matrix and you are not acknowledging them, and it's your fault that I feel this sense of self-alienation. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, right? This is good intentions gone awry, or someone would argue, are they really good intentions? Because if you're doing something for someone because you expect them to fill you up, is that really a good intention? And it's difficult, when you're struggling with codependency, when you get to this point where like, I took my daughter, or I gave my daughter, I talk about this in the Codependency Manifesto. So you throw your 16-year-old or your 17-year-old a huge pool party and, all the friends go home and your kid's tired and she goes to sleep. And the whole time you're seething because you didn't get enough pictures with your daughter on Instagram, or she didn't praise you enough. That is dysfunctional, right? So that is feeling like a victim, feeling like a martyr. It was your response. You threw this party that cost you $5,000. You made that decision. And so we have to learn as people to do things because we authentically want to, not because we want something in return. Anytime you do something and you want something in return, you are addicted to that thing, that return. You don't want to be addicted to that return. Codependency is about being addicted to something outside of the self. Codependency is about relying and depending on something outside of the self to act like the rescue boat, which is what Melody Beatty talks about. There is no rescue boat coming, dear one. And that is frightening. When I realized there was no rescue boat coming, I was deep, I was waist deep, I was chest deep in this relationship, right? I quit nursing school. My ex-husband sold our business. I lived in a house that him and his family built. His mother lived around the corner. His two brothers lived across the street. His sister lived around the corner. I was surrounded. I was enmeshed in this matrix of dysfunction. And I had three little kids, 11, 9, 3, and I had to get us out. That was terrifying. I can see why people go, no, I'm not looking at this. No, I'm not looking at this. I am not looking at this. I am not going through what I have to go through to extract myself from this paradigm. And it literally is a paradigm shift. And the shift first happens in your head, and you begin to realize that you were living one paradigm that was a subconscious paradigm. And then as the shift begins to happen in your head, you begin to slowly string together, if you stay on the path with codependent recovery, you begin to string together a new paradigm. It might take you longer than some people to string together that new paradigm. I made my life, well, I can't say it made it worse. While I was making my life better, I still fell. Because at the time of my awakening, it was like a false awakening. Because I was like, oh, I'm codependent. Melody Beatty says I'm codependent. My therapist says I'm codependent. Okay, I must be codependent. Codependent no more says I'm codependent. Yep, that's me. But I didn't realize that the codependency in me was my subconscious programming. I thought my relationship with my ex-husband was codependent. I thought that he was more avoidant. I'm talking Pia Melody language now. I thought that he was more avoidant and I was more the pursuer. I realize now it's much deeper. So in terms of the spectrum between codependency and narcissism, I was more codependent and he was more on the narcissistic spectrum. But neither of us were freaking healthy. That's not healthy. You want out of that spectrum. You want interdependence. You want independence. You want self-reliance, self-accountability, self-responsibility. You want to be completely in control over how you think and what you feel and what you do. You want to extract yourself. The thing is, though, while you're in the two paradigms, that meantime is where you're going to need a lot of tools. And I do recommend the work of Codependent No More, Melody Beatty. I do recommend Love Addiction or Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. I do recommend the work of Nathaniel Brandon, Honoring the Self. I do recommend that. And if anyone's really want to investigate the program that I put together, it's Codependent Recovery. And it's all about rewiring your subconscious mind so you can break through. We go from having this experience of being seriously codependent and childlike in our relationships. And you know what? You can be a lawyer, a doctor, you can be the most successful business person in the world and still be codependent, right? So you have to understand this happens to anybody and everybody. And to really free ourselves from the societal codependent program, which I've been talking about this for years, that we're asleep. And until you're talking to someone, it's like The Matrix. Bruce Lipton says The Matrix was actually a documentary. It's not fiction, it's real. When you start to awaken from codependency, you see codependency everywhere. You see subconscious programs everywhere. You begin to see this subordinate relationship with fawners and people pleasers and codependents and more narcissistic people, this giving my rights over to this other person. You start to see it everywhere. And it's mind-boggling, and it can be frightening, which is why I think people who understand this coming together, even if it is online, with a support system, people that understand your new language, right? That's why CODA is so powerful. My first CODA meeting, I walked out of there like I was flying high. I was like, these people get me. They get my language. They understand it. When I went to a few AA meetings with my uncle who was sober for many, many years, and he asked us to go to a couple of meetings with him, I was like, I get this language. People are taking accountability. They're recognizing that they were part of this, and there are skills here to learn. And so, to have an authentic relationship with someone else, dear one, I know it sounds so cliche, you have to have an authentic relationship with the self. You cannot have a healthy body unless you eat healthy, right? You cannot have a healthy mind unless you consume healthy information. You cannot have a clean house unless you clean your house, right? You cannot have a car that runs well. One of the things that I've insisted on my children, and I'm so happy, it's a little thing, but it's a huge thing. I've told my children, you have to get an oil change every 3,000 miles. Make sure you get an oil change. You want your car to last? You get an oil change every 3,000 miles. You make sure that you take care of your car, right? That is self-accountability, self-responsibility, you want to have an organized mind. Jordan Peterson says, make your bed. It starts with making your bed, right? So I think codependency, if you want to have a healthy relationship that is not a codependent relationship, there has to be some shift in your head where you understand, like, maybe it's not my fault that I'm here because of the way the world is structured. It's a paradigm. It's a subconscious paradigm. Karma is real. The Bible says the sins of the father fall on the son. It's not your fault. If your father was an alcoholic, if your mother was, a narcissist or a rageaholic, and you grew up, fawning as a way to actually survive your circumstances, and now it's become a pattern of behavior, and because the brain is more subconscious than it is conscious, it's not your fault that you're in a terrible, terrible relationship today. It's not your fault, but once you can get past this, okay, it's not my fault, that's going to help any shame trigger. I think that there have been plenty of people who shame people with codependency, and I just don't, I'm not an advocate of shaming anyone for being what they are, and even narcissism, if, it was a huge, huge awakening moment when I finally realized that my father was the way he was because he was a victim of narcissistic abuse. That doesn't mean that I excuse narcissistic abuse. It just means that there's a level of clarity around my dad that I have now that I didn't have before. And when I didn't have it before, I was stuck in anger and resentment, like, why are you this way? And then when I began to pull back, and I did, enlightenment work and mindfulness training, I was like, okay, this is the matrix, and this is a paradigm. And it's not for me to decide when he awakens. It's for me to use this experience to kick myself out of this paradigm with him and learning to become non-resistant. Because at the end of the day, if we're talking law of attraction, you want to be non-resistant because things that you are in resistance to persist in your life, which is really difficult, which means that there has to be some ego training, ego managing in order to have a more authentic relationship with yourself. Because your ego is going to tell you things should be this way. And when things are not this way, you're going to suffer. And when you say, well, things are this way, and I need to accept that things are this way because I can't control the thing that is this way, then you will suffer less. But, we also need to get over this thing because I think a lot of us think that human beings shouldn't suffer or that there's no reason that you should suffer. You're born, you're going to suffer. People are going to get sick. People are going to die. You're going to get sick, or you could get sick. It can happen to any of us. Look what just happened with COVID. People get into car accidents, people cheat, they abandon you, your parents get older, you watch them die, anything, your pets die. Loss is a part of life. We need to embrace this as a natural process. But the ego, when we think about death and dying and people dying, it kicks up survival stuff in us, right? The root chakra gets activated. We don't want to experience this suffering. We don't want to, which is the ego. No, I'm not going. I'm not doing it. I'm not taking the castor oil. I don't want the penicillin. It hurts. Ego doesn't want to experience that. So that's why some higher self, some awareness, some expansion in consciousness must be a part of the recovery process so that you can speak to the ego. You can speak to the younger self and say, it's okay. This is a natural process. I watched a story about a woman last night who was shot 9 times by her husband, who then turned the gun on his children and who then shot himself. And this woman has had a rebirth, and she's looking forward to the second part of her life. She's grieved for many years, and now she's looking forward to, she's found a new relationship, and she actually wants to have more children. I mean, this is amazing, but this is a woman that had to go through a rebirth of non-resistance to what was so that she can experience joy in the rest of her life, which is her taking accountability for how she felt, not taking accountability for what her husband did, but taking accountability for what was in her as a result of what this other person did. That is resiliency. That is accountability. And again, This doesn't happen overnight. So if you want to have a more authentic relationship, I would like to offer you a couple of things. Number one, you have to recognize the codependent patterns in you, right? You have to see, am I codependent? Where am I subordinate to other people? Where do I people please? Where do I fawn? Where do I give up my right to feel what I feel? Where am I afraid to set a boundary? That's very, very important. So identify the patterns in your life. Look in your childhood. You know, what did my parents model for me? Very, very important, because you are a product of your environment, right? So there might be some biological stuff going on, but in my humble opinion, our programs are really mostly the result of environmental factors. What were you taught? Were you taught that your feelings weren't important? Did your mother, was she subordinate to your father? Did your mother leave you alone and your father leave you alone for many, many hours? And when they came home, did they treat you with indifference? You know, were you taken to the doctor when you needed medical care, or were your feelings completely just irrelevant? Were you adopted? Were you adopted into a kind family or an unkind family? Were you in foster care? Were you bounced around a lot? Did you experience childhood trauma? What type of trauma? Was there anyone there to help you process the trauma? Did people ignore the trauma? So look in your past for these types of patterns, because these types of experiences are going to lend themselves to being a people pleaser, or being someone who's afraid to feel their feelings, right? Which, in order to experience an authentic relationship, you've got to be able to feel your feelings, because you need boundaries with other people. Your feelings tell you where you are in relationship to someone else. And if you don't know, if you don't have the confidence and the resiliency and the trust in yourself, and again, this is a process, that's why I take people through a 12-week process in my class. This does not happen overnight, because you have to learn how to do this. You have to change your patterns and programs in order to come through this in a healthy way, right? So you're recognizing these patterns in yourself. You're looking at childhood. You're connecting the dots, right? Number two, start seeing yourself as your own rescuer. You, higher self, is going to rescue you. You are going to reparent yourself. You are going to be the mother you always deserved, the father you always deserved. You're going to nurture yourself, and you're going to protect yourself. Not in a defiant way, but in a beautiful, loving way, right? You don't need to go, accuse people of being narcissist and go after them on social media and persecute them. You don't need to do that, because that keeps you stuck in the matrix. The more resentful, the more frustrated you are. And there's a season for being frustrated that helps you identify your I and create a boundary. But it's really important that anybody, hear me, anybody that wants to be free of this matrix, then moving past resentment and anger and persecution and all that is the goal. Because if it's not the goal, you stay tethered to this karmic wheel. It just is what it is. It's the paradigm we're all born into. But through awakening, through breaking through the paradigm, that's where your personal power resides. That's where you can change everything in your life. So start saving yourself, right? So ask yourself, am I rescuing this person, and why? Is this my responsibility to take care of this person's, drug issue? Is it my responsibility to rescue this person from their third DUI? Is it my responsibility to pay this person's rent? Is it my responsibility to cover for this employee who was out all night and wants me to lie to the boss? Is that my responsibility? This is really difficult stuff, because guess what? When you start saying no, all of these attachments start to turn on you, right? That's why you need skills. But these, for the sake of this conversation, I want to give you some tools to work on. Start rescuing yourself. The third thing is that you can do is stop seeking external validation. Be really, really honest with yourself. Where am I seeking validation? I've always talked about this subconscious and subliminal hypnotism that takes place with advertisers. These people hire therapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists to understand what triggers human survival, right? So, if I increase my level of attractiveness, am I increasing my worth versus, someone else's worth? And if I am, where the hell did that paradigm come from? I'm just asking people to think about why we're doing this. Where did this thing come from that makes me feel like being more attractive? And who says, by whose ruler is someone more attractive than someone else? This gets really, really prickly when you start to think about why and you pull yourself, you extricate yourself from the paradigm that the beauty industry has created, right? When you extract yourself from the paradigm, then it's like, why am I doing this, right? What I'm trying to do is expand people's level of awareness so that whatever you're doing because you want to do it, but know why you're doing it, right? Know why you're doing it, right? So it's important that we dig really, really deep and we ask ourselves. And, this is a rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole of us changing the actual world we live in. This is us, as individuals breaking through the matrix. This is us saying, I don't think I want to be a part of that anymore. I want to be a part of this new earth that Eckhart Tolle talks about. I want to be part of a new paradigm. And so I'm going to eat well and I'm going to exercise because I love every cell in my body, not because I want Joe at the gym to say, hey, your abs look great. I want to do it for me. So I want to be a loving human being and love myself so that I am a conduit of love. So I can be more loving to other people. I want to not judge myself for who I am so that I no longer have to wrestle with these feelings of not good enough. And as I'm able to do that within myself, I become less judgmental of other people. Again, I'm returning back to this love and this peace, So it is a rabbit hole, but we have to start somewhere because, if we stay unconscious, and I do believe that this is what, all the people that we know in this field, the Eckhart Tolles, the Wayne Dyers, the Louise Hayes, the Deepak Chopras, the Joe Dispenzas, and, the people that we turn to help us figure out like what is happening. Essentially, what we're trying to do is become less codependent. And become more self-actualized and more self-responsible and more accountable so that we can eventually return to the love that we are. Because if you're struggling in your relationships and they aren't authentic and they're painful and you tend to attract narcissistic people, you may not recognize how you are giving up your power to an authority. You're making someone else your authority. And in the giving up of your authority, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is it because you are afraid to feel your feelings, which in my case, when I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that I was afraid to feel the unworthiness of childhood. I was afraid to feel the abandonment of not good enough. That's what I was really afraid of. I was afraid to face all of the feelings that I stuffed as a child when, my mother raged at me, or my mother called me a bad girl, or she called me selfish. That pang of, I am not good enough. I didn't want to feel that. And I thought that if I rescued, if I catered, if I nodded my head, if I people pleased, and I had this fawn response when people were upset with me, or I thought I was upset with me, I was avoiding all of that. And it wasn't until I reverse engineered, and that's what I teach in the 12-week class, the 12-week Breakthrough Coaching Program. It wasn't until I reverse engineered that I was able to break through that matrix, break through this subconscious programming, and become more accountable for myself. And the amazing thing happened was that I let people off the hook. You weren't responsible for making me happy anymore. You weren't responsible for whether or not my business, did well or did not do well. You weren't responsible anymore for, my weight or how unhappy I was. I was learning to take responsibility for that. Now, what happens a lot of times is when you make that shift, when you have that paradigm shift in your mind, the people that you're involved with don't like it. They want you to fawn. They want you to rescue. They want you picking up the phone. They want you saying yes even though you mean no. They want you taking care of their kids. They want you lending them money. They want you to allow them to rage at you. They want you to allow them to cheat on you. They want you to allow them to mess with your mind, get you to doubt your reality. They want you to. And that's where I think we need the most tools, in that space where, it's happening. I'm feeling this stuff, like, it would be so much easier if I just fawn. Someone that I love very much in my family is in a 30-year relationship that is all about the fawning response, or, the getting rejected and the thinking I'm going to leave and then being afraid of leaving. And what does that mean? And going right back into the cycle of fawning, people pleasing, and denial, and this unhappiness cycle. I'm not judging. I'm just explaining. I discern. I'm very grateful that I was able to kick myself out of that paradigm. So I think that we need tools in that space, and it's not easy. And if you're somebody who, has been trying, to have an authentic relationship, and you've been trying to not be codependent, please understand that this is not a conscious journey. This is a journey that must take place in the subconscious realm. That's why my class includes meditations, healing theta brainwave meditations, at least 13 of them. That's why, there are 12 video lessons, and that's why if you take the active class, then the active live class includes 12 live streams with me, and those are weekly live streams in addition to impromptu live streams, and online support with my life coaches. So if you take the evergreen class, then there is no live support, but you still get the 12 meditations, 13 meditations actually. You still get the 12 videos. You still get all of the information, the PDFs, the journaling prompts, and the homework assignments. You still get all of that. This is not a conscious journey. You need your conscious mind to activate. That's where your free will comes in. Will you make this choice to be codependent no more? Will you do what needs to get done to confront in yourself what needs to get confronted? That really is the question. You think about Shakespeare, to be or not to be. That is the question. Are you going to thrash against what's happening inside of you, or are you going to confront it? Are you going to learn how to sit with it? Are you going to allow the true self to become individualized and self-actualized in spite of other people rejecting you? Are you going to stop being subordinate? Are you going to be the true self and emerge the true self and be the sphinx that rises out of the ashes? Because that is the potential of every human being, if you can have a more authentic relationship with yourself. And if you're interested in learning more about my 12-week class, whether it's the evergreen class where you can take immediately, or you wish to take the live class with me and my life coaches, go to www.lisaaromano.com/12WBCP. And if you send me an email at my support email, it's in the description box, I'll be glad to send you information. I'll send you a course outline. I'll send you a PDF, and we'll answer any questions you have to help you become codependent no more, so that you can live a more authentic life and become the true victor of your life, because you deserve it. You're a human being. You have a divine self. You have a divine individualized self. You've got to break through your own paradigm, your own family paradigms. You've got to break through societal programs. You've got to break through. But once you do, you have the tools that you need to become your true self and to live out loud, to live your innate gifts and values and what's important to you. You have the ability to become a loving conduit of peace, of calm, of forgiveness and empathy. And that's when you become a cup of these delicious virtues and characteristics. And that's when you become able to offer that to other people. And guess what? The less codependent we are, the less narcissist exists on planet Earth, because a narcissist needs a partner to play this narcissistic dance out with. And the less codependent you are, the more self-actualized you are, the more excited you get about accountability, right? The more authentic your relationships will be, the less you'll attract narcissists into your life, and the more confident you'll have in your life to attract the life that you always deserved. This is your destiny to awaken and to break through. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste, as I bow to the love and the light that is absolutely in you. Don't forget to think. You have a brain for a reason. Use it. Reprogram if you have to. Reprogram it if you have to. But make sure you use it. Bye. Namaste. Until next time. Bye for now.